This event, I want to officially welcome you to AES San Francisco first ever experimental music event. We're very excited to have this. I would like to personally thank the community members who are present here. If you don't mind standing up. All right, the community members, yeah, please, yeah. We're grateful to have them to organize this type of event and give it and work hard to give access for free to our members and at a reasonable cost for non-members. But I encourage you to become a member. Who among you are not AES members? No shame. Well, we hope to convince you to become a member. My name is Loic Maestracci. I'm the chair of the San Francisco section. We try to host an event like this every month or so. And as I said, today is our first experimental music event, but we're so excited about it that in 3 weeks we have in 2 weeks, no, not even a week, 10 days, 8 days. We have another one at the Roxy. We'll receive the communication about what we have on August 8th at the Roxy. At the Roxy, exactly, bonus point. So on August 8th, we partner with the Roxy Theater on 16th Street in the Mission District for a special screening of Sisters with Transistors. And we'll have the pleasure of hosting Suzanne Ciani for a Q&A after. So I hope you can come. And lastly, I wanted also to announce our annual studio crawl, which is happening September. Actually, I'm going to have Jessica say when it's happening.
September 20th, Friday, from noon to 10 p.m.
So we got this. September 20th, there will be the annual AES studio crawl. This time is on the East Bay. There will be about 11 studios participating from Alameda, Oakland, Berkeley. So stay tuned. We haven't announced the tickets, but that's a phenomenal event that we host every year, and it's a great networking event. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And without further ado, I really, really appreciate you coming here tonight, giving the permission to spend a couple of hours with you. And I also want to extend my thanks to the performers and the panelists. And I will welcome Brent from the Center for New Music. So we are in his home. And thank you, the Center for New Music, for hosting us today. You can thank them as well. And Brent, to you.
How's everyone doing tonight? Hey, there we go. Yeah, gotta be a little more excited than that. Okay. As you said, my name is Brent Miller. I'm the co-founder and executive director of Center for New Music. We started this place back in 2012. And the dream of this place actually started in a moving truck as we were hauling percussion from the Other Minds Festival, which if you're familiar with Other Minds, an amazing experimental music series, concert festival. The next one is in September, and you should go because it's going to be great. Features some of my friends in a group called Yarn Wire, which are going to be great. But when we hit on this idea, we were like, we want to open a new music space that can have crazy experimental music and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of hard to pay the rent, especially in San Francisco doing that. So what do people need here in San Francisco? Space. So during the day, this is a co-working space for nonprofit organizations. We have about 15 music organizations that use this as their home base. And then we have a few kind of music adjacent groups like SF Cinematheque, which is a really cool experimental film festival. And then we have some organizations that are working with the people who are experiencing homelessness and stuff like that here in the Tenderloin, because it was important for us to be good community members, especially in this neighborhood. So all that work is happening here during the day. Then everyone goes home, put out the chairs, turn it into a concert space. And The way we've always done it is 100% of ticket sales go directly to the artists that you see playing here. And since 2012, we've had almost 1,500 concerts in this space. Thank you. I've only personally been here for about 900 of those, but they were all great. One way you can get involved with Center for New Music is by becoming a member. $100 for the year gets you one free concert here in the space where you make 100% of the door, so you can make a profit off of your membership. How cool is that? And so if you're interested in that, you can check out centerfornewmusic.com. Our next August tends to be a light month for us for some reason. I guess Burning Man draws everyone away from here or something. I don't know. But we have a monthly series called the God Waffle Noise Pancakes that happens. Yeah, Noise Pancakes is awesome. That's August 20th, I want to say. And then at the end of the month, on August 30th, my electric guitar trio, Harjo, is performing. So if you'd like to come hear some really loud electric guitar music, and you can come here for that. So Friday, August 30th. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. So now we'd like to go ahead and invite our panelists up here who will be performing tonight. So if you all want to come out, I don't know what order we should sit in. Let's see, we got everyone? Great. All right. So they mentioned that they wanted me to do introductions for everyone. And instead of reading formal bios and all that stuff, I thought I would just tell you what I know about these people. And part of that is what's in their bio. But, I don't know. It seemed more personal this way. So we'll start down here. At the very end here, we have Karen Stackpole. She's performed here at the center many times. And she likes to play gongs and other metal instruments. And I love the sounds that you make with them. And so it's always exciting to see that when you're on the list of performers on a given night. Let's see, you work at Dolby, and you're also a recording engineer yourself, right? Yeah, I've seen your name on a bunch of credits among our community. I guess, yeah, here. Yeah, this makes more sense, right? We're not used to miking everything up because it's such a small space, and I usually just yell at people. So, is there anything you would like to add to your bio there, Karen? Introduction?
I haul a lot of gear all the time.
So true.
And the thing I love, one of the many things I love about Center for New Music is there's no stairs.
Yes.
And we got Rockstar parking today right out in front because
exactly.
So I figured things are off to a really good start, and I'm really looking forward to talking and playing with everybody.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so next here, this is Krys Bobrowski. You perform. I always wondered this. Do you pronounce the W as a W sound or as a V sound?
W.
W sound. Okay. Whew. I was hoping that was right. So Krys is an amazing instrument inventor, and Krys also plays in a trio. Is it a trio with Karen, or is it a quartet? I forget now. What's the name of the group?
Vorticella.
Yes. Man, they played one of the best concerts ever here at Center for New Music. It was so good. With Brenda and...
Aaron Espelin.
Okay.
He's our cellist.
Excellent. And then where do you teach?
I teach at the College of San Mateo. We have a music technology program there.
Awesome. Your students are great.
They are. They actually did an event here, which was such a wonderful collaboration.
Yeah, they were so cool, and it was fun to be around with them. Is there anything you would like to add to your little introduction?
I'm very grateful for Karen hauling my stuff here today.
That's what I do.
That's great. Okay, so over here we have Franck Martin, and I know that Frank... So I know that you're a big synthesizer and computer music kind of guy, right? And I guess we're supposed to be sharing.
Okay, we'll share the microphone.
Yes.
All right.
Here, and then, honestly, that's kind of all I know about you is your music making. Is there any personal details that you want to share?
I don't know. I came from Fiji and I came here and I used to do kite surfing in Fiji, and then I came here and I say, oh yeah, they do kite surfing, but the water is too cold. I need to do something else. And I like electronic music and discover modular synth, and San Francisco is a good place for doing electronic music, so I started there and here I am. And because I don't know how to do music, so I needed something, with knob and tones. And I like also moving the sound in space. Okay. So trying to, break boundaries. That's a fun part.
Awesome. That's great. Next here, this is Willie Winant. And if you made a list of every artist that I was into, composer-wise especially, Willie will have worked with them, which is it blows my mind to this day. So, I immediately think of Christian Wolff. I think of Lou Harrison. I think of John Zorn. And he's just a phenomenal percussionist, John Cage. And I've seen him many times with the contemporary music players, and he also taught at Mills for a long time. Unfortunately, we have to use past tense since Mills has closed up shop. And you've done so much that's hard to pick out exactly what to highlight. But I will say that my own personal introduction to experimental music was an album by the band Mr. Bungle called Disco Volante. And it blew my mind as an 18-year-old. And I ended up getting a hold of some VHS tape back when they had bootleg festivals, if any of you are old enough to remember such things. And on that VHS was this crazy percussionist playing the crap out of this music, and I was like, who is that guy? And did the deep dive into the liner notes and discovered that it was William Winant, and went even further than that and started discovering all the music of the composers who I've been mentioning. So forever thankful for that. And is there any bio tidbits you'd like to add to your introduction?
No, you said it all.
Oh, I said it all. Dang. Then here on the end is someone who I've just met recently, and this is Julius, and it's Dobos? Dobos. Oh, almost. So you sent me an actual fancy bio. And he also told me that he hates introducing himself. So I'm going to read the bio here. He is a platinum album electronic music and film composer, sound synthesist, and mastering engineer. Does that mean that you work in your own studio?
Yeah, I do, or freelance elsewhere. So.
Excellent. He's released 11 albums and written scores for films and television programs for nearly 3 decades. Do you like scoring films and TV shows?
I'm glad you asked about that, not the 3 decades, because the question doesn't date me. But I used to like it a lot. 1, 2. I think this is that. No, now we have that. Okay. I used to like it. I still like it, but I think actually this is the proper place to say that if the project is interesting enough, I still like it. But it's hard to find a really interesting project.
I understand that. I tried scoring 2 films in my life, and I had such a miserable experience that I cannot imagine doing that for a living. So you have a pseudonym, Forgotten Future, here. And what kind of music do you make as that?
Well, that actually, I think I would rather not answer it too long, because that's going to be a perfect tie-in to our discussion here about experimental music, because I can't define that myself.
I love it. You know, whenever I talk about Center for New Music to people, you know, my little 1-sentence blurb about this place is, this is a home for music that doesn't have a home. And so that's exactly what I like to, what we like to host here at Center for New Music. All right, so this panel we're talking about experimental music. And I forgot to turn my ringer off because I was doing ticket person duties at the front door. But anyways, that is fixed. So, you know, a lot of times what I get asked is when I say I'm really into experimental music, people are like, what is that? What are you talking about? My mom still doesn't know what I'm talking about, but that's okay. And so I thought we could easily just go down the line here and kind of talk about, you know, what do you think, what is experimental music to you? Like, what's the short answer there? The elevator pitch for people. We'll start with Karen.
Rampant exploration and kind of busting out of a lot of the normal formats or genres or configurations. I mean, I started as a rock drummer, right? I love rock and roll. I still love rock and roll. I have a rock band, and it just feeds my soul. But I did see, I saw Terry Bozzio, you know, and he just did some really interesting things with his cymbals. I remember seeing a drum clinic, and he had just these chompy things for hi-hats, and then after that I went, wow, that's really cool, and I just started exploring. So that was for me, that was the jumping point. And then you find yourself going to, you know, pawn shops and thrift stores and picking up odd bits and bobs and seeing what you could do with it. So to me, that was the start of what experimental music was for me, and I think that's what it is: rampant exploration, open mind.
That's a great answer. Oh, Krys.
I guess when I think about experimental music, I think about experimental listening. And so a music, whether it was made in the 1500s or whether it was being made right now, if it causes me to listen in a different way, to listen to sounds, then it's experimental. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And then we'll move over here to Franck.
Yeah. I don't know. Take maybe an analogy. You see movies in black and white, and they're very nice, and then suddenly colors. And it's a little bit the same in music. You've got very codification of everything, and then you can go outside of these boundaries and and discover new texture. You don't need to have a rhythmic section. You don't have to break the rules. And electronic is nice for that because it's not necessarily with an acoustic instrument where you're expecting a certain rendering of it. Then you can do things, and I really like moving the sound in space, find some different texture and things like that. I also play with concrete sound. You record something in the street, and then you play with that. So, how do you transform noise into music? So that's the kind of things. It could be difficult experimental because if you've never listened to experimental and you listen to it, you say, okay, what's this noise? But also it's a progression from something that you know to something you know a little bit less, and then you go through the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Pass the mic over to Willie.
I just started listening to records when I was a kid, and I'd go listen to Walt Disney soundtracks or something, and then progress to maybe rock music, and then jazz, and then I just sort of go to record stores and buy records, and it might and I would start buying weird music records, and that's probably how I got it. I'm collecting records, listening to music, and just sort of progressing from one thing to the next. And so I would say it was just always listening, always buying records or stealing records or doing something, and listening to or looking at album covers and just buying it because of the way the album cover looked, or buying it because the name interested me, like Sun Ra, or Pharaoh Saunders, those kind of things. I'd had no idea what the music was like, but I liked the name Thelonious Monk. So different things. Boingo, boingo. All right, there you go. Support your local record stores.
Well, I've been looking for the answer for quite a while, and I just don't have it. I honestly don't know what experimental music is to me or to anyone, really. It should be. I don't know if there's a clear definition, because especially these days, the lines are so blurred between different genres, right? What was really edgy and new 30 years ago, now with the retro, has been coming back for the past 15 years. It's perceived differently, but the music hasn't changed. So is the music less experimental because now it's well known, right? So it's interesting to think about it, right? And also interesting to me that what you all have in some way articulated is that it's outside of the norms. But what are the norms? How do we define what is normal? Because that also changes over time. It changes between different cultures. What is the norm? So I guess the one way I can think about it for me, from my perspective, is if music starts to go in a certain direction and it ends up going where I would absolutely not expect it, to me that's more likely to be experimental. Also, I wouldn't even call myself an experimental musician. And of course, you might be asking why I'm sitting on this panel. And my answer is that I love to challenge and break those norms that we perceive as norms. And it might be a weird analogy, but let's say baking a cake is pop music, and making some really tasty, unique ethnic food is experimental music. Then we're here to bake some really unique, great food, right? So what if I'm a cake maker and I put a load of sugar in it? So basically that's breaking these norms that we talk about. Experimental music is a different kind of between set of norms, some kind of norms, right? So I just like to change the way things go. So we'll see how that works out today.
Yeah, I find it interesting that several of you, when defining what experimental music is, talked about how you listen yourself, and how you're a listener and you are an explorer. And I think that's one of the most vital parts to being a fan of experimental music, is being curious, a sense of curiosity that really, what happens when this happens? What if I do this? Or what does this record sound like? I have no idea. There's the famous, Frank Zappa's story of he always wanted that Varese record because it looked so cool in the store and it said it was hi-fi, and saved up all his money, and that blew his mind, and that's what made him make the music that he made. At least that's his origin story. So I was wondering, Krys, if you'd like to talk about a little bit of curiosity, like what are you curious about when you're making music?
Well, definitely just sounds themselves, just listening to sounds and curiosity of sounds and finding interesting sounds. You mentioned listening, and I think, one approach to experimental music is just listening to sounds as you would listen to sounds, say, we probably have all listened to a thunderstorm at some point, right? You're not expecting a major scale in a thunderstorm, probably. Maybe it would be nice if a window was open and kind of pop through there, but so that's definitely always been a central part of what I do. And then I guess also what I'm curious about is, as a composer, is how much do you leave open, and how much do you leave open for things in the environment to come through, or for musicians to make decisions that would influence the music. So how much do you let go of all of that, and how it combines with everything else around you, including other people's input. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Definitely. Frank, what makes you curious?
With modular synth, it's a lot of sound design more than melodic things. So sometimes it's just trying a technique, or I've got a sound and I'm trying to develop something around it. It's a little bit, the exploration, and I like also to. There's a podcast that I listen, every week from France Music, and they do like a 1 hour of different artists in experimental, acoustic, and everything. So discovering a lot of style. It's it's interesting. Xenakis, and here in the US, Claire Rousset, and there's few folks more. I co-run also an open mic, and we've got all style of electronic music, from noise, destruction, to other experimental stuff. So it's interesting. It's kind of a little bit refreshing to hear something different, and even, this is an interesting idea. The full part, I may not like it, or I've never heard something that was bad made by local artists, but some part, this is an interesting idea, and I'll try to reproduce it and then create. So this is all exploration. I heard something, I want to do it again. I fiddle with knob, and then I get something, and I say, that's nice. Let's try to develop something around it.
Nice. Julian, you want to talk about what you're curious about?
My curiosity started with, I had this idea, I would like to make sounds that no one has heard before, and of course electronics again is a good way to go about that. And I was a teenager, and my parents didn't allow me to buy a synthesizer because they wanted me to practice on the piano so I can actually play well, and I'm very thankful for that. But when I got a synthesizer later, it's the overcompensation syndrome where you can't stop, so now I have way too many, and I explored all of them, and amazing sounds, and I'm still curious about finding new textures and new kind of sonic expressions that I haven't found before. But I'm the most curious about how I can bring emotions back into that, because when we start focusing on sounds a lot, often it becomes, music can communicate so much, but often it becomes more intellectual and less emotional. And one thing I really care about is finding the balance where you do have some interesting soundscapes and you envelope the listener. And I agree with Krys, the listening is a huge part of it. Anytime I make music, I imagine that my ideal listener would actually take the time to listen, to sit down and listen and spend the time with it. So lots of nuance, details. But to me, it's not enough. I really need to have that emotional content expressed, and whether it's through harmonies or melodies or whatever else, that's what I'm curious about, how this can merge. Also, reacting to what Krys said, I love the idea of giving up control to a degree, as whether you're a composer, performer, where that's a perfect way to not let your previous experiences subconsciously lead you to a similar direction when you simply give up the control, because there's a point at which we can't be original enough, because what we have learned and what we have done affects what we do today. You can't fully turn it off. That's part of your DNA. It becomes part of your DNA. So I like to explore that through collaborations. And Krys mentioned the kind of how the audience can listen, how important that is. Actually, I did a thing where I switched the roles. We were just talking about this briefly before we came here, where I did a performance where the audience was controlling the performance with flashlights. Well, their phones that had flashlights, and we installed cameras on the ceiling. They were tracking that, and we ran it through Mac, and we basically converted light saturation into MIDI CC messages that were controlling certain parameters in Ableton Live that I was using on stage. But the experiment started going so well by the end, I was finding myself reacting to the audience's choices. So we effectively reversed the roles, who was leading, who was making the decision about where the music is going, and who was enjoying it. It was me on stage alone, and 3,000 people were actually controlling it. So that was like a collective decision-making sampling sort of experiment, and it was interesting. So I'm curious about these kind of things.
Excellent. So, Karen, when you are working with the instruments that you work with, how do you go about creating your catalog of sounds? Do you come up with like a catalog in your mind of your vocabulary?
There is, when you've been playing those instruments like I have for a long time. I think by the time 33 years now. Since that was my first gong, there we've been together for over 3 decades. And honestly, throughout all of throughout all of the years, I always find something new on that gong, right? But you do end up having a bit of your bag of tricks, right? That's all about interacting with something. It's like a big fretless piece of metal. So you know what to do to get certain harmonics out. You know what to do to get certain beats happening there. It doesn't always cooperate because it depends a lot on the acoustics of the room and what else is going on stage. But yeah, there is a bit of a repertoire of sounds, but there's always a new one because of the nature of the instrument.
Yeah.
And when you have 45 of them,
for sure,
then you just like to see how they interact, and that's all different. So then you get pairings and triples, and this one goes with that. As you can see, I got 5 gongs. I tried them all out first to see how they played together, and they play very nicely together.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Willie, kind of in that vein, what's it like to develop a language with a composer that, to explore the percussion instruments that you perform?
I think that, what everyone's saying here, listening and exploring and coming up ways of experimenting. For me, it's a lot of times it's like collaboration. Mm-hmm. I don't like to play music by people I don't know. I like to play music like of my friends and who know how I play. Also, I like what he was talking about, food, just collaborating, putting different things together, different people together, not knowing what the outcome's gonna be, just sort of, you know what I mean? Sort of just put people together and see what happens, and that's another thing, sort of like just working all the time with different ingredients. But I would say that collaborating and working, as far as the idea of working with composers that I know and collaborating, that's a very satisfying experience for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think I'll pause for a minute and ask, is there anyone in the audience that has a question that they want to ask the panel? I kind of hate waiting till the end to ask questions. I don't know. It's always fun. Sorry.
When you're playing the gongs, do they make each other resonate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, everything that's getting played on the stage at any given time makes all of the gongs resonate. So I had a friend once play his trombone into the back of the gong, just notes, right? And that was the whole track. So he would get a harmonic going. Depending on the note, the harmonics would add, then he'd play a note and bam, would stop. So it was actually really cool. So then you start exploring just the resonance, what's exciting it, what adds, what creates a node, stops, right? It's fascinating. Endless years of awesomeness.
I have another question. Do you ever combine your rock drumming with the gongs?
Every time. Yeah, I never go to a rock gig without a gong or two, or any gig. There's.
But like the other way around, if you're doing like a gong kind of thing, adding in some sort of rock drumming or maybe just percussive moves.
Well, I could tell you just a quick little story. I was doing this lowercase sound thing with a really cool group down in Santa Monica, and it was kind of like a musical blind date. This clarinetist Krys Bobrowski put together, and it was lowercase sound, trombone, very quiet.
Can you explain what lowercase is for this audience?
Very quiet, very quiet. So you really have to listen. We're talking listen, right? So trombone, you'd expect, this is also changing it up, right? You see a trombone, you expect, if it's pointing at a mic, it's going to peg and overload and just like, woo, trombone, shorty, But to have someone just, just like that. So we were going along at the Museum of Modern Art, and it was all this lowercase stuff. And I brought, see that? I had drums. I would haul stuff. I had giant, like a Vietnamese temple block set, and I had all this stuff. The playpen, right? And as a percussionist and a drummer, you really want to just go for it. But the lowercase sound thing, I thought I was subtle, but So there was an electronic musician. His name is Steve Roden. He's since unfortunately passed, but we were just playing together. And then all of a sudden I kind of snapped, right? So I started doing some rhythmic stuff on some stone tiles that I had. Tink, coming up out of the traffic outside was louder than what we were doing. It's like tink, tink. And then he responded. And so through this lowercase fog that was happening, we were bringing these little coming out of it, and it was just delightful. Yeah, sometimes you snap and you make something different happen.
That's great. Neil, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've had time spent with a lot of experimental filmmakers in San Francisco, and I've done audio accompanying and stuff with them, and I've always argued with them about the word experimental, because it always sounds like you don't know what you're doing. And I asked them, they always complain the fact that nobody likes what they do, because it's not normal. And I always ask them, what have you done to help educate people to learn how to listen to what you do and how to appreciate what you do? So it's open to everybody.
Oh, okay. So what do you do as an experimental musician to invite listeners in? That's how I'm understanding this. Well, I know I'm the moderator, but I'm going to answer this question. Because the concert that's going to be happening on August 30th here at Center for New Music, the thing that I got excited about was taking gestures that are familiar to listeners, like, metal guitar. People understand that sound, the distortion, the power chords, It's like a sound that's familiar to them. And then how do I take those sounds and present them in unusual ways? So I've taken one aspect of the music making and made it simple to understand. And then I'm giving them another aspect that they can focus their brain power on figuring out. And that's kind of my approach to inviting experimental listeners into my music, Yeah.
I could add on to that. I've done a number of sound installations, often using the instruments that I use myself in performance or write for, including the Gliss glass, and I've set it up. The nice thing about the Gliss glass, it's very flexible in terms of its size. I can have really long tubes and take up this whole space with glasses throughout the space. And so to play it, you play it very much like you would a wine glass, which was actually part of the idea behind it. I really wanted really long, slow glissandos, and I could do it very easily with electronics. But I really wanted something physical and something that people could connect with maybe some previous experience. So I feel a little bit of an overlap there. I've done prepared rocking chairs because everyone knows how to rock in a rocking chair. So I've definitely considered these connection points with some of the instruments I've worked on.
Yeah, for sure. Does anyone else want to? Yeah.
I have, I think, something that I have actually two answers. I like that you, in your question, you even mentioned filmmaking, because if you split the experience to visual storytelling and music, but you combine it in an unexpected way where the music might be more experimental, but the film itself is not experimental, then you can reach a really wide audience. And it's not like you just jump into deep water and that's experimental music. But it's a gradual introduction because it's different media types that they're consuming, and only one component might be experimental. So to me, that's one way to introduce it. And there have been fantastic soundtracks that most people might not even notice how experimental it is because they're paying attention to the film, and the film might be very, like a mainstream whatever movie. But if the director makes from our perspective, the right decision, then the music might not have to be, just hiring John Williams for the next gig, or Hans Zimmer, whoever. The other answer to me is it might actually turn into a discussion. I would love to. You answer the question, so now I'm taking over the moderator. Yeah. I have a question. Depending on how we define experimental music, where we draw these boundaries. If you break music down to texture, melody, harmony, rhythm, and of course you can go deeper than that, but just these basic textures, we all have talked about textures and even rhythm, right, here, but we haven't talked about melody and harmony. So my question is, do you think experimental music has to exclude memories? I would even go as far as, is it possible for experimental music to be catchy but still remain experimental? In other words, another way to balance the components might be the musical components, basic musical components of music. So introducing someone to experimental music by not restricting it to one or two, but including some components that are more familiar and some components are really new, again, might not be the kind of in-your-face approach, but more gradual.
Well, I think Willie can talk about this.
Why me?
Because you've worked with Lou Harrison, Terry Riley. Those both of those composers, catchy melodies there.
As a kid, I bought, Rainbow and Curved Air, and I liked it.
Yeah.
And then I bought Church of Anthrax. At the time, I hated it. So when I had records I didn't like, I would play Frisbee with them. And so Church of Anthrax was that. But then 30 years later, I learned to appreciate that. But this thing about what you were saying, something about people go to movies and they're listening to experimental music and they don't know that maybe that's, that's part of it. And I remember going for the first time to see Merce Cunningham here at Zellerbach Hall, where like 3,000 people were there. And it was like John Cage, David Tudor, and Kasugi playing like just pure noise pancakes, like pure noise cranked to to 11. And I was like, and there was like all these people, 3,000 people, like, watching Merce Cunningham and listening to this totally whacked out, crazy music. So, I mean, there's like that's another example, maybe how, now maybe most 3,000 people didn't like it, but I was like blown away. I was like, wow, I've never seen that many people listening, to like a noise concert, and that's what they were doing. So, does that make any sense? I don't know. So, can sneak it in somehow. Like that. Like Cunningham was great. That was a great dance in general. Dance in general is a nice way of exposing people to weird music, and they're not necessarily, they're kind of digging it because there's a whole thing going on. Besides, there's dance, there's something to look at, there's lighting. There's something going on that makes it, all the parts together make something that, people can appreciate. And I definitely see that in all kinds of, whether it's, Trisha Brown or, Viola Farber working with Alvin Lucier or Merce Cunningham working with all these great composers over the years. I don't know, does that shake anyone's boat? Yes. Somebody raised their hand. Or they were just stretching. Yeah. Okay, I got it.
No, they were. You were getting a yes. Oh, we got another question back here.
As you're exploring and kind of discovering these new sounds, do you find yourself also kind of creating a new type of vocabulary to describe the sounds that you create?
Do you describe it? So do you mean actual words to describe these sounds?
Yeah, like actual new kind of, I guess, onomatopoeias maybe to describe the sounds that you're making.
Oh,
I'll go back to my kind of emotional content in the music through sounds. I find it in one occasion because I don't describe them in my brain, but when I have to save a patch on a synthesizer, I have to come up with a sound that's descriptive. And I do come up with things like beige noise, because that's just what it feels like.
Yeah, interesting. You two down here? I mean, Glisglass. I mean, I know the two words obviously refer to something specific, but it just has such a nice je ne sais quoi.
I think it might be more symbols. So you may find yourself, for example, with the Glisglass, when I first was working with it, I was working with voices. So it wasn't that I wanted the singer to sing an A and the glass to be an E, something I could notate, but I wanted, say, them to match or for them to beat against each other or for one to slide at a certain kind of, certain speed and curve compared to something that was not moving. So I think it's more about coming up with ways to communicate to someone else what you want to happen in terms of the sound, but also things like sometimes working with traditional instruments, and this is something that I really like, is that you can work with found sound objects, and you can think of them and working with pitches, but then you can kind of reverse it, work with traditional instruments, and how do you expand the kind of sounds they make. And so then sometimes, again, traditional notation may fail you, and you can revert to either symbols, but you could also, make a buzzy sound, right? I mean, you could get into these kind of language, combination of language and graphics to try to communicate something about the sound you would like.
Frank, do you?
With modular synth, I think it's sometimes kind of hard to have a language to describe it. And I don't know if you look, it's a bunch of wires. And what I have, if I unplug it, I don't know if I will ever find it again. The best way I can do is to take a picture and then record it a little bit on the sound. So I know where I need to connect all the cables, and I've heard what it was, so I can find it. So, and it's also interesting to see some composer that try to codify experimental music, and they've got this whole new notation and people interpretation. So it's hard to sometimes to develop a language, and sometimes it's nice. It's it's right here, right now, and it will never exist again.
But do you name your little recordings?
Well, that's the part which is difficult when I don't know. You need to release an album, so you need to name the album and you need to name the tracks. So I don't know. Sometimes that's what comes through. I don't know. What's my last album? Je me souviens, which is I remember, and also things. Pop music is very happy, or a lot of music is happy, and I like to go into non-happy music. So that could be sad, melancholic, that could be angry, and that's nice to explore. And that one I think was a little bit more emotional, melancholic. So I remember. So that's sometimes the emotion that comes out, and then a couple of words come together.
I think composers come up with interesting titles, like what you say, Rainbow and Curved Air, kind of says it all. And Anthony Braxton with his fractions and his mathematical titles for his piece. In a lot of ways, sometimes just the title of a piece might say it all.
In C.
I think that, so sometimes you can just look at titles of songs sometimes, and it kind of, in ways, if it's right on, it kind of says what it, maybe gives you a insight as to what you're going to hear, maybe.
Yeah. And I totally agree with the word experimental, because I don't know what I'm doing, and the experimental is a good excuse.
Yeah. I always thought Jim Tenney was so good at describing something that he wanted a musician to do and to come out, to perform on their instrument. And it was always such an unusual thing that he was trying to describe. But he described it so succinctly in his pieces, and especially in the postcard pieces. I highly recommend you check out James Tenney postcard pieces if you don't know what I'm talking about. But they were literally postcards with an entire piece of music on them that he would mail to his friends to perform. And then those pieces had an entire universe in them.
There's a whole genre of music called prose scores. Pauline Oliveros, I think, maybe even has a book, where the score is just like, I'm ignorant, not a musicologist, but maybe what to do with a single stroke roll, or what to do here, listen. Even Pauline had titles like To Marilyn Monroe and Valerie Solanas, in honor of their suffering. That to me says it all right there. So I think that
All the fish tank?
What?
All the fish tank?
The fish tank.
Yes.
My hearing is
sorry.
so bad.
Yeah, fish
I didn't
tank.
bring my hearing aids.
There was Pauline Oliveros and Martin Subotnick, they had the fish tank, and then wherever was the fish was what they needed to play.
Right.
There was the instruction: if the fish is here, then you play that. If the fish is there, then you play something else.
So that's getting a lot close to what you were saying, like how do you name the sound? And the question was, do you come up with adjectives or vocabulary for that? What about the opposite? I actually take mostly the opposite approach, but that's where I feel I'm much less on the experimental side, more on the conceptual side, meaning if I'm working on a concept album and I have a concept, I come up with the sound that I already have the emotional description for, and that's how I design the sound. So I guess it's more purposeful in that sense. So I have the description first before I hear any sound, and I make the sound.
Very interesting. How long are we supposed to be talking? I'm having so much fun that I'm kind of like just lose. Oh, I know there are, but let me get an answer to how long should this go?
We want to start the performance at 8:30. So
8:30? Oh, good. Man, we got lots of time to talk. Here.
I wanted to drift back a little bit on the question you guys talked about having, going to a normal movie and having experimental music behind it or things like that. There's the thought, at least from my perception, that experimental art and experimental dance is more socially acceptable. More people, we have big museums with modern art. People go to it, may or may not like it, but there seems to be more attention to that. So I'm always curious on what other people's perceptions of maybe why that may be. Why is certain types of art forms that are experimental are a little bit more acceptable or easier accessibility to the general public than others?
This is an easy question. Who wants this one? No one? Karen, you got thoughts about this, sure.
I think there's certain aspects of mass appeal that'll draw someone in, and you have a multimedia experience, right? That makes the sound a little bit more accessible. And visual stuff is always just seems to grab people. If you ever see a TV on or something flickering, everyone's just tractor beamed right away, whereas a lot of people go through the day not even hearing anything. You walk down the street and you hear a weird bird and you're like, oh, listen to that. Like, oh, what? They're not even, a lot of people don't listen. They're in their own little cage, but if they can't get away from, the visual sensors, and it just somehow just has a direct connection into their brain. I think that's what I think. I think it's, I work at Dolby, so I do a lot of the sound stuff, but you start adding vision and lighting and movement to that, and then it becomes more of an immersive experience. Some people aren't trained to really listen, or it's not something that comes naturally to them. I think a lot of people that get into experimental music are gifted at birth with a very keen sense of, what's audible. And, I'm sure every one of us from very young, you hear a little sound and it just, I used to sit there and just gently slap the water on the top of the pool because I liked the way that sounded, You watch Westerns and you like, what is it, the coconuts? Is that an English swallow? Right, the coconuts, the horses and the Westerns, I love that sound, or gravel, tires on gravel. So you're always, the wind in the trees, the way birds sound together. Not everyone notices that, but everyone's gonna, if they can see, they're going to right away. It just draws you in right away. It's hard to not. I think that's kind of a thing.
I would like to latch into something that Karen, you said, the accessibility of sounds. I would even expand that to, and this is coming from my perspective and probably my circles, my audience's perspective, who are not typically in experimental music, that very often there's a perception, an outside perception that experimental music is some kind of high art that you have to be extremely educated and skilled to understand and appreciate, and people are a little bit afraid to get into it. there might be also often an idea that it's more of an elitist art form, that it's only for those who are selected to be on stage and perform that, because it's, if you do it, then it's simple. If they do it, it's minimalist, right? And so I think there's that kind of boundary. And earlier there's a question like, how can we make it more accessible? Well, we can maybe work on those boundaries and breaking them down. Because I think a lot more people could find joy in just enjoying sounds and really, thinking about the textures that they're hearing, if they were less afraid to get into it. So I think we could make it more inviting.
Percussion is the gateway drug.
So right. So right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Verez.
Yeah.
For me, I think that the music is the most abstract of arts, even the most, simplistic little tonal melody is a very ethereal thing. And whereas, the visual arts, as you mentioned, and the, motion, these are things that we do and we see, and it's a more concrete thing than music ever is. And so, I forget the Wealth of Nations author or whatever, he says that music is worthless because it happens and then it's gone. And he wrote, pages and pages and pages saying how musicians were the lowest form of people because they weren't contributing to society or earning or creating something. And he put them down there with like prostitutes. And I think that's kind of how a lot of people, like the music is just ethereal. It's this thing that's just not as real, not as concrete as the other arts.
NFT.
Yeah.
So, another question then.
Yeah.
As a composer and creator yourself, do you wish that people were able to appreciate your music without having an additional medium accompanying it?
Oh,
is it frustrating for you? Because it's probably the case that a lot of the public can appreciate your music, but more if there is some visual presented with it. But is it frustrating to you?
That's a good question. I would say that it was frustrating when I was in my 20s. And now that I'm older, I'm not so frustrated by that.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it's great. I was thinking about that because I performed on Sunday as part of a little noise show that happened in the Mission in a vintage clothing store. And it's where they moved the racks of clothes off to the side, and I had 15 minutes to make the most horrendous noise that I could possibly make in this small space. And there were 30 people all crammed into this space, watching this thing. And everyone was just happy to be there and experiencing art and experiencing community. And I was like, man, this is so great just to be in this space, to be with these people who are interested in hearing what I created. And they were like, wow, that was fun to be here in this little thing. And, and the night before I was playing, guitar in an ensemble that, there was 300 people in the audience. That was fun too, but it was I don't know, it wasn't as exhilarating, honestly, just because of that special community thing. And I think the people who are really into this music are really into it, and they're very passionate about it, and they're finding it. And I love being in a space with those people. And I really think that that's who I want to write for. That's who I want to, the people who are the curious ones, the ones that want to hear this stuff, That's what I get excited about. That's my community. That's how I connect, I'm not really that worried about, making a living off my music. You know, the capitalist side of music is where you kind of want to increase your audience, I think. But
or maybe you're just the appreciation.
Yeah.
If you're creating something, you probably care about the fact that people appreciate it. I'm sure all of you. So I'm just curious whether sometimes you wonder, you wish they would appreciate it for itself.
There's when it comes to appreciation, there's quantity and quality, and for me, it's less frustrating to experience the relatively lower quantity of people being interested in our or my type of music than as frustrating it is to watch the majority being brainwashed by 4 chords for the past 50 years. So that's on the quantity side. Now, qualitatively, when I get in a live setting or online or wherever a comment where someone tells me how they sat through my piece and discovered so many things and they kept listening and they had to listen to the recording that was just the same recording, they had to listen to it 8-9 times to discover all the elements, all the hidden elements. To me, that's much more important appreciation than to have, you know, at the end of a show, 3,000 people telling you, "Oh, this is great music," and they're humming and they forget about it. So,
I think education is an important thing. There's a Canadian composer named R. Murray Schafer who wrote books on teaching experimental music to 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. Because anyone, you know, if they're exposed to something, you know, without any prejudices or anything, can learn to love something. And so maybe that's also something in society, about certain societies where, you know, kids start listening to, you know, interesting music, you know, at a very young age. And as I said, some people have actually, you know, gone into that in a deep way. And I think R. Murray Schafer is a good example of an experimental composer who has, you know, written books and worked with young kids and things like that.
And I'll just add, you know, we have I think a really rich community here, and Eddie Shocker, who runs the Camp 510. You know, my daughter came home with a paper plate, Tom Nunn inspired Scratch It, you know, and it was wonderful, you know, and just to see that and to see how that is getting into education in the Bay Area is wonderful.
Yeah. So that's a way of getting, you know, people, you know, if they start young, instead of like making them maybe, I don't know, listen to Beethoven or Mozart, you can have them listening to Krys or Karen or, you know, something like that. And then by the time they're 12, they're buying records, and whatever. Education.
I really like that you said interesting music. And can we come back to this a little bit, because I'm really curious about your opinion. Does experimental music have to be weird? Does it have to be out there for it to be experimental music? Or can it resonate easier with a closer to average musical, like someone with a more average musical experience, but still be interesting and not the usual? Would that be called experimental music still?
I think anything can be interesting.
Yeah.
You know, anything. Whether you call it, whatever you call it, I don't know. But, you know, I find everything interesting. I don't know. I mean, that's how I got into it. I was like, that's, you know, let's listen to that. And that was interesting. I don't know if I even thought that was experimental music. It's just music to me.
Yeah. Before the panel, we briefly talked about it just for a couple of minutes. What if, Brent, you gave us like 4 chords from some pop song, and that something would have to use our instruments and improvise them, but keep those harmonies happening. That would be an experiment, right?
What? Say that again?
So if you get the most common 4 chords from a pop song,
right?
And
4 chords from a pop
and you give it to all of us here,
Right.
and we go there on the stage and start improvising around those 4 chords.
That could be interesting.
That's an experiment, right? So that would be experimental. Now, if we agree that that could be still experimental music, even though it has those most basic 4 chords, then wouldn't we agree on the definition of experimental music, that it doesn't have to be weird or really out there, but it can have very much familiar components, and that could go back to, without a film, those familiar components could actually open it up and make it resonate with.
Also gets into this field of appropriation. Do you know John Oswald and Plunderphonics? Back some point in a land and in a time long, long ago, there was this kid from Canada who was a Jim Tenney student. Jim made some really famous computer music pieces. One was based on a song called Blue Suede Shoes by Elvis Presley. And this kid, John Oswald, saw this thing, what Jim had done, in kind of deconstructing and reconstructing this Elvis Presley song and making it into some incredible thing, that he made a whole record of like taking Michael Jackson's songs and Dolly Parton songs and kind of, slowing them down, speeding them up, making kind of what he calls plunderphonics, like doing, deconstruction, reconstruction. Who's the Foucault, fuck you. I don't know. I think that he did amazing things, taking like what you're just saying, appropriating some famous, like super famous, to a point where Michael Jackson sued him. And he had to destroy everything. But at the same time, Elektra Records saying, well, here's our library. We're giving you carte blanche. Go ahead and make a record using anything in the electric, which is, be a lot of things. Love, Doors, Tim Buckley, whatever.
Motley Crue.
Yeah, Motley Crue. I guess.
What about like jazz players who they play the chords of the song and then they go outside of it for their jams,
Yeah.
Doing a lot of experimental things, stretching those chords and doing strange melodic twists with the chords, and then they come back in.
Yeah, exactly.
The last album from David Bowie was interesting because Black Sabbath brought some, semi-experimental music or jazz style with syncopation and stuff like this. So I found it very outside of classic music. So I think we say, what the hell, I do what I want. And then he went to explore that. And something which is interesting is painters used to paint portrait as close as reality, and then photography came in and they say, well, what do we do? And then that's where you had a renaissance of different type of painting and things like that. Today we've got AI in music, so what do we do? That could be interesting to have all this other style of music and then say, okay, this is experimental or this is new, but how do I bring it into the normal pop? I don't know, pop or whatever, normal genre, but bring some kind of new elements. And also when you try to compose a song, it's not necessarily the melody, bass and rhythmic. You need to bring some ear candy to make it interesting. Otherwise you get bored. I see a friend, you say, after 4 bars, I'm getting bored of your 4 bars, so find something else. So, bring the ear candy, and maybe this is when you can bring something experimental or something new here. So I think that could be the branching. Another artist like Aphex Twin, how he massaged the sound to create this stuff. It was new, so. That's about experimental music. You try something new, and then maybe somebody in in a more classic, more music business way will bring this stuff to bring something new and interesting.
And those components might not even have to be merged in the same composition, because my personal favorite example for someone who did both experimental and very much not experimental music is Ryuichi Sakamoto. I'm sure many of you know his work, who has composed traditional film scores that won Oscars, but also worked in both just by himself and also in collaboration. Very much experimental music, using electronics and some electroacoustic instruments. So even as part of one artist's career, the two can coexist. And of course, that exposes their audiences. Because I know Sakamoto's work from his film scores for the past 30, 40 years. But being a listener of his film scores, that exposed me to his other work. And that's another way maybe to draw on people into what else you can do. As a matter of fact, tomorrow this is probably maybe shameful even to talk about this in this setting, but I'm going to be playing at a convention music that I wrote for, I worked on a major cartoon and anime show 20 years ago, and we play it on stage, and it's fun, but that's very, very different audience than here. But connecting these two audiences, I think one sound at a time, one texture at a time, it's totally possible.
I always think about one of my heroes, David Lynch, and how Twin Peaks or even Blue Velvet are pieces of art that are very familiar. The Twin Peaks is the soap opera. There's all the soap opera things happening in it, but that is not what that story is. And it's and where people kind of lost interest, of course, is when it started getting really weird. But I think that third season is just brilliant, and I love that there's this way in. We're taking this form that's very familiar to us, and then we're subverting that just a little bit. There's that twist, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's juicy, that's nice. I like that.
Question. Because of the format of tonight, where there's this panel, this discussion, and then you're performing, what do you want us to know to prime us to appreciate the performance that you're going to give us? I would read that. I think that would be really. I'm very curious about that personally, and I think to maximize the enjoyment for us, what would you like us to know before you start playing?
Oh, that's good. Let's just go down the line and talk about how people are going to be approaching tonight's performance. You want to start, Karen?
I have no preconceptions going in.
Well, you have instruments that you've chosen.
I have.
So you have made some decisions already.
I did make some sonic choices, yeah. But as far as collaborative, well, in all fairness, Krys and I have a duo together, Gliss Glasgow. So we're very familiar with each other's sounds, and they go very well together, right? So I'm really, and I've heard your work before, and you're incredible. I like how you just just give me a snare and a couple cymbals. I'm good, right? Remember when Gino Robert got sick of hauling his stuff around? He's a drummer, a percussionist too, and he just started bringing around paper bags of styrofoam pieces, like cups and Italian plates and a bow. And I remember recording his album One Rainy Day at Rastascan Warehouse. And I said, all right. And I put on the headphones and I said, all right, let's do a sound check. And I had this nice vintage stereo pair of U87s. And he just picks up and he's like, this is Italian plate. And he went, and I was, oh my God. So I don't foresee it being like that, but who knows with these sound makers. We'll see what happens. If you want to throw a fly in the groovy legato thing that happens, then then you go with it. So we're going to explore and see how our quintet roads lead us.
I'll interject here real quickly. When we were on our little Zoom call, well, I guess it was actually a Google Meet now that I think about it, and we're all talking, we started talking about the music that would be happening tonight. I loved knowing that half of the group were hardcore improvisers. Their idea is I need blank brain, hear what's happening, and then approach that. And then we had the other half of the group going, what's going to be the form of this? Let us build a structure now that we can follow throughout the evening. And I love that. I love that everyone's going to be on the stage and there's going to be these almost warring concepts happening at the same time. I find it beautiful.
Very promising.
Yeah, Krys.
I guess just to let you know that I'm playing the Gliss Glass, which is amplified with contact mics, but otherwise all the sounds are acoustic. And then the kelp horn is made out of dried seaweed, and that's going to be amplified through a mic, but otherwise it's a kind of a found sound instrument. There's no written notes other than who's starting, I think, and who's playing next, and who might be playing with whom, and that's about it. And then your set's all acoustic, also, right, with some miking, right?
Yeah, a couple mics, but mostly acoustic.
And so it's kind of a combination of that, and then Willie, I believe, playing percussion.
I was sort of not planning on playing, but I, maybe I'll sit in on somebody's thing.
Okay, and then
I didn't bring anything.
And then we have electronics. So I think for me, I'm kind of interested about how that's going to come together.
Yeah, I have no idea what people are going to perform. I came here in the beginning. Say, okay, I'll bring some quadraphonics. Say, oh no, we'll do it. Just stereo. So I said, okay, I'll bring a small one. Then came back, quadraphonic. Okay, I'll bring my modular synth because it's a whole sonic palette, and maybe I'll use only 10% of it, doing some weird noise. When I perform with others and we try to perform together, usually I found out that it takes about 2 hours to get together. And then I used to do every month we would jam and bring some modular and connect together, and then with a friend we get very fast together because I know what's his style, and so we started to learn each other. But sometimes it takes a lot of time to get there, and so I don't know if I'll get there that fast or not. So surprise. Otherwise, I'll make some texture in the background. And I wanted to say also, I feel that the music I make is more an extension of myself. So if you listen to my music standalone, yeah, but if you meet me, then that's maybe where the connection is happening.
Excellent.
I'm here to break all this. To me, it's the exciting part is that this will be a true experiment if we try to break it, because when you go to an experimental music event, you don't know what you're going to hear often, but you know there's going to be experimental music. So I bring in the not so experimental components and see how I can break what everyone who's doing experimental music is doing, and that is the experiment itself. If that makes sense.
I don't know if I like that word now after this panel discussion, experimental. Matter of fact, I think I hate that word.
I totally understand. Well, I would like to thank everyone for sharing your thoughts here. This is a great discussion. I also want to thank the audience for your great questions. I love that. And this is a community space, and so it just feels good to us to be here as a community. So now let's listen to some music. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking we just use this for
ambience.
Yeah, and
Excuse me.
It could be either one. Let Willie be choose. You can do any of these three mics.
Oh, I was just saying we could leave the other mics up for band needs.
Okay,
Whatever we're
then
not using.
go ahead and do that with whatever these two mics you'd like. Yeah. But then this one you can play for me. Yeah. These three. No, let's not mess around. I mean, the way I would do it is I'll make a stack over there.
I'll grab one.
Yeah. Or do you have one?
This is one thing that we actually didn't talk about in this chart.
And I guess I'm just thinking about line of sight.
We're gonna shorten the colors.
Yeah, we could put one here and
You continue taking these chairs, Chris. Not that one, because that's where you can go to.
Before you start the performance, that's something to say. You ask him? And if you're on your own, or you
A snare drum would be good. A snare drum.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, there's things back there you'll find. Anything is open to that.